They say the most dangerous crimes are not the ones committed in dark alleys or behind locked doors. The most dangerous crimes are the ones committed in plain sight under bright lights with trusted hands, and never discovered. This is the story of a crime so carefully executed that it survived time itself. A crime that lived quietly for 2 decades, untouched by justice, unchallenged by truth. And at the center of it all stood a man the world would later kneel before and call king. Before we begin, if you enjoy gripping psychological crime stories where power, silence, and intelligence collide, make sure you like this video and subscribe to the channel right now. It helps bring more stories like this to light. When Elias Rowan was in his early 30s, no one would have guessed he carried a crown in his future, or a secret in his past. To the public, he was simply Dr. Elias Rowan, a senior physician at a government general hospital. Calm, methodical, soft-spoken. A man whose presence alone seemed to steady panicked patients and exhausted nurses. He was known for precision, for discipline, for never raising his voice. What no one saw was the weight he carried beneath that pristine white coat. Elias was the son of a deposed king. Years earlier, his father's reign had collapsed under political pressure, public manipulation, and the calculated rise of a rival power. At the center of that fall was the Prime Minister, a man whose ambition had no ceiling and whose rivalry with the monarchy was deeply personal. The royal family was stripped of influence, pushed into symbolic obscurity, and forced to survive quietly while their enemies flourished openly. Elias did not protest. He did not speak out. He did not seek revenge. He studied. He trained. And he waited. Medicine became his refuge, but also his shield. In hospitals, trust is absolute. Authority is rarely questioned. Orders are followed swiftly, especially when spoken calmly by someone who appears to know exactly what they are doing. Elias understood this better than anyone. The day Margaret Hale was admitted, no alarms were raised. She was the Prime Minister's wife, respected, watched closely, protected by reputation alone. Her symptoms were alarming but not unheard of. Severe discomfort, breathing irregularities, weakness that progressed rapidly. The hospital responded as it always did, activating emergency protocols. Dr. Elias Rowan was assigned to her care. No objections were made. No second opinions were demanded. Why would they be? Elias reviewed her chart with a stillness that bordered on indifference. Years of preparation narrowed into minutes of opportunity. Every decision he made that night followed accepted procedure, except for one. A single adjustment so precise it disappeared into the noise of standard treatment. Not reckless, not obvious, just enough to turn recovery into collapse. Margaret Hale passed away quietly before morning. The nation was shaken. Tributes flooded in. Media outlets mourned the loss of a woman described as elegant, supportive, and politically untouchable. The Prime Minister himself appeared hollowed by grief, standing before cameras that documented a tragedy no one could yet explain. Investigations followed swiftly. Autopsies were conducted, medical files were scrutinized, panels were formed, committees argued, specialists reviewed data late into the night, convinced that something had been missed, but every path led to the same conclusion. Natural causes. No malpractice, no evidence of foul play. Dr. Elias Rowan was cleared without hesitation. Years passed. The case grew cold. Investigators retired. Witnesses moved on. The hospital upgraded systems, replaced staff, and archived records. Memory softened. Suspicion faded. The death became a footnote in political history rather than a mystery worth reopening. And Elias moved forward. If you are still watching at this point, drop a comment with "I'm still here." Let's see who is truly following this story all the way through. 2 decades later, the world had changed. The Prime Minister was gone, his era dissolved into history books and political analysis. The monarchy, once weakened, had been restored through public sentiment and strategic reform. And standing before cheering crowds was King Elias I, praised as a symbol of unity, restraint, and wisdom. The media adored him. They called him a healer king. A man who understood suffering. A ruler whose medical background made him uniquely compassionate. Few leaders in history had worn both a crown and a stethoscope, and the narrative wrote itself beautifully. But beneath the palace floors, in a room that no servant entered, Elias kept a reminder of who he had been and what he had done. An old hospital identification card, worn, expired, useless to anyone else. To him, it was everything. On the 20th anniversary of Margaret Hale's death, a sealed envelope arrived at the palace without a return address. No sender, no explanation. Inside were copies of old medical documents marked with unsettling precision. Dosages circled, timelines underlined, observations that had once been dismissed now framed as questions. At the bottom of the final page, a sentence written in steady ink. Some crimes do not disappear because they are unsolved. They disappear because they were perfectly designed. Security searched for the sender. They found nothing. The letter was never acknowledged. The records were never reopened, and the king continued to rule. Because some truths are not buried by force, they are buried by patience. If this story stayed with you, if it made you question power, justice, and silence, make sure you like this video, share it, and subscribe to the channel for more psychological crime stories where the truth hides in plain sight.